Have you ever looked into a woman's eyes and wondered, was any of that real? I'm a legal escort. I've worked for years, both as a companion and a madam. And the one thing men always get wrong is thinking they understand us. No, this isn't about just sex. It's about the quiet confusion that grows when a man doesn't know what he truly wants, but keeps pretending he does. Most men were never taught how to be seen without performing, or how to ask for connection without shame. That's why I'm here. These 4 surprising truths aren't about judgment. They're about clarity. So next time, you won't feel so lost. If you think this topic is worth a few minutes of your attention, please like the video, subscribe, and comment "love" below. I want to know who's really staying with me. He walked in wearing a tailored blazer and expensive shoes. He smiled politely, placed the envelope down, and sat across from me like it was a business meeting. Then, silence. The kind of silence that stretches too long and begins to fill the room with awkwardness. He looked around as if trying to remember why he came. His hands folded, then unfolded. His lips moved slightly. No words. This is a man who has known success. A man who once had certainty in his voice and purpose in his stride. But here, in a quiet room with a woman he barely knows, he forgot how to begin. And that right there is more common than you'd think. I've seen this many times. Men over 50, accomplished in careers, respected by peers, maybe even loved by family. But when it comes to intimacy, they feel like schoolboys again, unsure, untrained, unspoken for. Not because they're weak, but because the world they grew up in never gave them the tools to speak this language. No one teaches men how to talk to a woman when they're not trying to impress her. No one teaches them how to feel seen without a job title or bank account. So, they come to me not just for company, but for something they can't even name. I remember a man who asked if it was okay to just sit together and not talk. When I said yes, he teared up. "My ex-wife used to tell me I was emotionally unavailable," he whispered. But I didn't know what that meant. I thought providing was enough. He wasn't trying to be dramatic. He genuinely didn't know. Some clients try to cover their uncertainty with jokes. Others ask a dozen questions about my life as if they're conducting an interview. And a few lean into their silence, hoping I'll fill it. But all of them, in their own way, are hoping I'll see something in them they haven't dared to see in themselves. That's why I say this work is not what most people think it is. Yes, the surface is about companionship, but underneath it's about recognition. It's about being in a room where no one is demanding performance, where being a man doesn't have to mean knowing all the answers. And the truth is, when a man stops performing and starts simply being, he becomes someone else entirely. Softer, more human, more open. That's where real connection begins. Not with action, but with presence. So when men come to me and sit in that quiet, awkward, yes, but honest, I don't rush to fill it. I let it stretch because sometimes that silence is the first true thing they've shared in years. There's a myth people love to believe that men only come to escorts for one thing. You know the word. It's the assumption behind every joke, every judgment, every awkward silence when someone finds out what I do. But here's the truth. Most of the men I've seen didn't even touch me. They didn't pay for pleasure. They paid for permission. Permission to talk, to be unsure, to fall apart a little without anyone fixing them. And the irony? They often came with more shame than desire. One man, let's call him Daniel, met me monthly for over a year. Never laid a finger on me. We drank tea, sometimes wine. He told me stories about his daughter, about the job he left too late, about the marriage he never quite mourned. He once brought me a book, said it reminded him of his mother. Then he cried. I wasn't surprised. What surprised him was how safe he felt doing that in front of me. Because unlike in the world outside, in this space, he didn't have to lead, fix, or prove anything. I wasn't his wife, boss, or therapist. I wasn't asking him to change. I was simply present, and that presence did more than sex ever could. Men like Daniel aren't rare. They're just hidden. hidden behind suits, sarcasm, and an exhausting need to look like they're okay. But when you strip all that away, not the clothes, but the armor, you start to see a different kind of longing. It's not lust. It's loneliness. Many of these men are surrounded by people. They lead teams, raise children, sign contracts. Yet, when it comes to emotional closeness, they've been starving for decades. Not because no one loves them, but because they were never taught how to let that love in without feeling weak. That's why they find their way to women like me. Not because we're exotic or dangerous, but because we feel available. Emotionally, not just physically. And no, that doesn't mean every escort is a therapist or every session is tender. But it does mean that the connection they seek is far deeper than most people are willing to admit. So the next time you assume men seek out women like me for cheap thrills, think again. Many of them are not chasing heat. They're chasing warmth. And while the world mocks them for it, I've learned to see it for what it is. A quiet, deeply human attempt to feel whole, even if just for an hour. What they want more than anything is to be seen. Not stared at. Not obeyed. Seen. And sometimes the only way they can ask for that is to pay for it. There's a moment no one talks about, the moment when a man cries in front of a woman he's just met. Not from lust, not from guilt, but from something quieter. Grief. I remember him clearly. Gray at the temples, wedding ring long gone, voice a little hoarse from holding too much in. He didn't want to undress me. He wanted to tell me how his daughter hadn't called in months, how his ex-wife told him without blinking, "You're just not emotionally present." And he didn't even know what that meant. We sat side by side on the couch. I didn't speak much, just let him pour. When the silence came, it wasn't heavy. It was respectful. After a while, he asked me something I didn't expect. "Do you ever get tired of hearing about our mess?" I smiled. Because the truth is, yes, sometimes I do. I'm not a sponge. I'm a person. And the things men bring into that room, loss, longing, confusion, they don't just bounce off me. They settle, somewhere behind the eyes, behind the smile, behind the well-practiced presence. People assume escorts are emotionally detached, that we're numb or cynical or too seasoned to feel anything. But I've sat in more pain than most therapists I know. The difference is, I don't have a couch or a degree or a clock ticking down the hour. I carry it in my own body. Quietly. In fact, during my early years in the business, I often went home drained in ways I didn't yet have language for. Some nights I'd fall asleep with my makeup still on, too exhausted to wash the weight off. Not just the mascara, but the stories, the regrets, the silent hopes that maybe this time someone would stay. Because yes, I've been hurt too. Not by fists or cruelty, but by the slow erosion of pretending to be untouched by human need. And here's what no one tells you. Pretending to be okay is the loneliest job in the room. That's why when men come to me with their heart half open, I don't scoff. I know what it costs them to get there. I know what it costs me to receive it. But I do it anyway. Not because I have to, but because someone needs to. So no, I'm not made of stone. And no, I don't forget. I remember the ones who whispered, "Thank you for listening." And I remember the ones who never said a word, but needed to be heard all the same. There's a reason I remember the smell more than the faces. Weed, cheap perfume, cigarette smoke. Sometimes something sour underneath it, all like fear masked by fruit-scented lotion. The first time I worked with other girls under a madam, I thought I'd be part of something glamorous. A team, maybe even friends. But when I pulled up to that house, what I saw were 4 young women stumbling out of an old car, eyes glazed, breath full of booze, and polished, chipped-off fingers that shook from something stronger than nerves. They didn't speak much English. Most came from Mexico, barely past 20, and none of them looked like they wanted to be there. I was older, sharper, and I drove myself. I had chosen this for better or worse. But watching them, I started to understand something ugly. Not everyone got that choice. Some girls had men waiting in the car, not boyfriends. Not really. The kind of man who doesn't walk you to the door, but waits for your envelope like it's rent. I didn't ask. You don't have to. You learn to read the air, the glances, the way silence tightens around someone who used to speak freely. And here's the part that stays with me. Clients didn't see the difference. They'd laugh, flirt, make demands, and sometimes even say, "You're not like the others." As if that was a compliment. But I knew what they meant. I wasn't high. I wasn't terrified. I could talk back and still keep it warm. That's why I got called again. That's why I collected the money. The madam trusted me. The clients remembered me. And the other girls, some of them never came back at all. Later, when I ran my own place, I started seeing the pattern everywhere. At least a third of the women who came through had someone controlling them. A boyfriend, a roommate, a man helping with logistics. The truth was always messier than the script they were told to memorize. People like to romanticize this world. Movies turn us into sirens or victims. But most of the time, we're just women trying not to fall apart in front of people who pretend not to notice. And that's why I tell men this truth. When you book time with someone, you're not just paying for company. You're stepping into a system where not everyone gets to say no. Where the smile might be practiced and the yes might be survival. If that makes you uncomfortable, good. It should. Because awareness isn't meant to be easy. It's meant to wake you up. To make you ask, not what you can take, but what you're stepping into. And once you see that, it becomes a lot harder to pretend you don't. He thought he was saving her. That's what he told me. He spoke with tenderness, like a man proud of his generosity. She was a cam girl, bright, sweet, always smiling on screen. He started tipping more, chatting longer, calling her his little secret. "She's different," he said. "Not like the others." But the truth was, she had a boyfriend. Not just a boyfriend, a manager. The kind who set up her schedule, handled the payments, bought her lingerie, and quietly controlled her passwords. He didn't hit her. He didn't yell. He just managed everything. She never said he was her pimp. Most women don't. The word tastes like betrayal in the mouth of someone still trying to call it love. I met many women like her. Gentle, smart, good at making men feel like heroes. And behind the camera, a man watching every message, coaching responses, making sure the illusion never cracked. It's not that every cam girl is manipulated, but many are. Not because they're weak, but because they're trained to be accommodating. To say thank you even when they're exhausted. To giggle at the right moments. To turn loneliness into a business model. And men? They fall into it willingly. Because it feels like intimacy, but without the risk. You don't have to ask for permission. You don't have to wonder if she really wants to be there. You just pay, and she appears beautiful and kind and never disappointed. But here's what no one tells you. Just because you're paying doesn't mean she's free. I've known men who spent thousands trying to help a girl they believed in. Sent gifts, paid rent, bought promises, not realizing they were part of a much bigger machine one designed to make them feel powerful while keeping them blind. And sometimes the woman isn't even aware she's part of that machine. She believes she loves him, or needs him, or owes him. The strings are softer, but they still pull tight. That's why I always ask men one question. Do you know who else is in the room with you? Because it's rarely just her. There might be a man in the background, a plan, a quiet script. And if you never ask the hard questions, you'll never know which part of the story you're really in. Even with me, some of my clients thought they were in love, thought our connection was different. But what they loved wasn't me. It was how I made them feel. Wanted, needed, seen. And that's fine. That's part of the work. But let's not pretend it's always real. Because sometimes what you're buying isn't truth. It's a very expensive lie, wrapped in affection, sold with a smile. By now, you've heard more than most people ever will. You've seen behind the curtain, not just into the life of a woman like me, but into the quiet, aching corners of men like you. And maybe, somewhere in all of this, a question has started to form. Why do I keep searching for connection in places built to hide it? That's not judgment. That's reflection. Because the older we get, the more we realize that our needs never went away, they just got quieter, more polite, easier to dismiss. Until one day, you're paying a stranger not for sex, but for safety. Not for a performance, but for a moment where you can finally put down the mask. And that's okay. Truly. There's no shame in needing to be seen. But here's the truth most men don't hear. The real intimacy you're searching for can't be bought. It's not in the fantasy. It's in the permission you give yourself to show up as you are. Awkward, uncertain, still learning. I've seen men spend years trying to recreate a feeling they barely remember. Something soft, something sacred, something safe. But no matter how much they paid or how many women they met, the ache never really left. Because what they were longing for was never about sex. It was about recognition. They wanted someone to see their loneliness without pity, their desire without mockery, their confusion without correction. And maybe the hardest thing to accept is this. You don't have to enter a hotel room or open a private chat to get that. You just have to stop running from your own questions. So if you've made it this far, thank you. You're not alone in what you feel, and you're not foolish for seeking it. But I hope the next time you find yourself reaching for someone, whether it's a partner, a professional, or just a quiet voice in the dark, you'll ask not, what can I take? But what am I truly asking for? Because when a man walks into a room with kindness, with honesty, and with a willingness to be seen, he's already more than halfway to what he's been chasing. And sometimes the answer isn't out there waiting. It's right here, underneath everything you've tried so hard to hide. If this story made you pause for even a moment, please like the video, subscribe to the channel, and comment love below. Maybe what you're searching for is the very thing someone else is still waiting to hear.